Good morning. Welcome to a hedgerow in Wiltshire. No angels in the tree behind me that I can see. Just a few crows, the low light of the sun and the slow rasp of the traffic along the A4. We were thinking yesterday for Michaelmas about William Blake's local seraphim roosting like rooks in the oaks of Peckham. And that had me thinking all day about the more extraordinary features of the biblical tradition that have formed such a focal part of our art and culture across the centuries, and the way in which, though outlandish, angels have featured and crop up everywhere in our speech and social imaginary, as you might say. And it caused me to take down from the shelf this wonderful book which I read years ago and have dipped into again this morning, Telling the Truth, by the American novelist and Christian minister Frederick Buechner, one of the greatest, I think, Christian writers of the 20th century. Still alive, I think. He's very elderly now, so he must be in his mid-90s. It's subtitled The Gospel as Tragedy, Comedy and Fairy Tale. Buechner has a wonderful, wonderful style of writing. He's one of the few people who I think can write truly about Christian faith in a way that feels real and authentic, and without the jargon and froth that so often covers over and is a distraction from the kernel at the heart of it. And this book, as a literary figure, he examines the gospel in these different genres: tragedy, comedy and fairy tale. And it's the last bit that I've been rereading. And he encourages us not to rationalize or avoid or downplay those bits of the biblical tradition that seem eccentric and are like the angelic parts, those features that seem far-fetched. He said that they're the very things that we need not to avoid but to talk about. Partly, he says, this is because tales of mystery and imagination are at the heart of all cultures in all times, so far as we can tell, that people have longed for and imagined and explored whether there could be doorways into other worlds. And this is the fairy tale, where there is a route into, typically, an alternative world. We were watching the film Coraline the other day, and the book itself I read some years ago, really quite terrifying fairy tale, as many of them were. And those stories of entry into another kind of dimension, close often to our own, through a wardrobe, whatever, that's Doctor Who, isn't it? A world very like our own, but into which we can find a route and see the world differently. Buechner encourages us to embrace those aspects of the gospel story, and to home in on, and not to rationalize them. I'm just going to read a little passage of that particular chapter. With his fabulous tale to proclaim, the preacher is called in his turn to stand up in the pulpit as fabulist extraordinary, to tell the truth of the gospel in its highest and wildest and holiest sense. This is his job, but more often than not he shrinks from it, because the truth he is called to proclaim, like the fairy tale, seems, in all but some kind of wistful, far-away sense, too good to be true. And so the preacher, as apologist instead of fabulist, tries as best as they can to pare it down to a size which they think the world will swallow. he concludes that when we do that, we make the fairy tale of the gospel like the Wizard of Oz, which he thinks is the most modern and cynical, actually, of fairy tales, written in 1900, and where all of that which is truly magical and mysterious is actually evacuated of its meaning. It's a sham. And he concludes that the gospel is too good not to be true in the end. You'll have to read the nuances of it to get the sense, but I'm encouraged today not to avoid the extraordinary, and so I'm going to search up the hedgerow a little further and see what I can find, and maybe a route into the heavenly world. God bless you as you go to ground.